They're very important because there's no individual, not one of us knows it all. And there are two basic ways of disseminating the right kind of information. One of them is, formal presentations like we do here. What are the best practices? IT security is changing all the time, so the frequency of these events is pretty important. But I think of equal importance, and maybe slightly more important, is the networking that goes on afterwards, because no longer am I just listening to some of the industry vendors telling me about best practices and techniques and everything else. I'm talking to my peers, people who are in banking, and I'm in banking, people who are in manufacturing, and I'm in manufacturing, who understand very intimately the problems I'm dealing with every day. And of course, they have implemented their own ways of doing that. And I want to hear from them, and I'll share, what I'm doing with them. And I think that's, fundamentally one of the most valuable aspects of an event like this. But the other key to it is doing them frequently, because this whole landscape continues to change. I think the role of security is becoming a lot more important, literally every year. More and more companies have a Chief Information Security Officer now. So that's a key aspect to it. So, it's a very prominent position in any organization now, and it doesn't matter what industry. So there are certain industries that treat it as more of a priority. Some of the obvious ones would be banking and retail, especially the ones that are more heavily regulated. The other way that it's changing is it's not a technology issue alone anymore. So the Chief Information Security Officer, all the IT security people, they have to be very savvy, obviously, in the capabilities and the deployment of the technologies, but they have to understand why they're implementing these controls. Right? There are a lot of regulations out there. They have to understand, what are some of the legal requirements? What are the reporting requirements? What am I trying to control? So interpreting things like the payment card industry standard. Over in the US, all the healthcare standards for protecting patient healthcare information, all these different things. So you see a lot of these individuals having to be legal experts, technology experts, but also understanding the business strategy, because you can't make it fully secure. I have to understand strategically for the business, where are my priorities, right? What are the most sensitive aspects of the business? What are the critical systems that cannot go down? For example, I'm a web retailer. My e-commerce system can't go down. But if a server gets attacked and it's running a couple of HR applications, I'm going to prioritize that lower and deal with the e-commerce system. So understanding of the business is another way that it's all changing. And that's equally important on the government side too. What are the government priorities? How do we protect, citizen information, all these different things. Only 3. So then I have to make them big ones. If I look at the 3 big areas, I look at one of the biggest challenges is the changing way IT is being delivered. It's no longer this central mainframe that people hook terminals into. It's highly distributed data centers. You've got more and more mobile users coming in through smart devices, phones, you've got plenty of laptops, so it's an extremely distributed infrastructure. You've got the introduction of cloud computing now. So some of that infrastructure may not be yours anymore. And that workload that you're running in the cloud, you don't necessarily know, is it going to stay there? Could that workload be moved across a geographic boundary? Well, suddenly, if I'm hosting private information from my clients, I may be breaking laws if that moves. So it's getting a lot more complex the way IT is delivered. Software as a service is another way. When I look at software as a service, the security controls of that service are the responsibility of the service provider. They have to be. I have no control over that. So I have to have the right contractual agreements in with them to make sure I'm protected. That's just one area. So that's the changing IT landscape. The other piece is the way the consumption of IT is changing. Right? It's no longer the dumb terminal attached to the mainframe. It's we can access it from everywhere, from kiosks in an airport, from our phones, like I said earlier, right? And how do we control where that information goes, what is stored in that device, where that device moves to? So that's a huge challenge, I think, the second area. And then I would say the third area is just the whole threat landscape, right? There are plenty of different motivations. Some people are just doing it for fun. Some people are doing it for financial gain. There's even terrorism-based attacks, and they are becoming more and more sophisticated. Some of them are not high-impact attacks, which you notice immediately. You can batten down the hatches very quickly, but some of them are very slow and they grow, so they're undetected at first. And then by the time they are detected, they've done a tremendous amount of damage. So that whole landscape is changing constantly. A number of new viruses and attack signatures that are created every day is growing significantly. So just to briefly summarize, the changing IT landscape, the changing way IT is being consumed by all different stakeholders, and then that rapidly changing threat and vulnerability landscape, I think, are the biggest challenges.